Hi everyone, hope you are doing well. My name is Gonçalo Pereira from the Experience Agile Week conferences, and I would like to welcome you to this adventure. And why is this an adventure? At Experience Agile, we are always on a quest for providing answers and different points of view to different questions and different topics related with innovation, strategy, human factors, agile practices, and many, many others. Today, we start a new discussion around an important subject that is always a challenge for a lot of organizations, which is innovation and what could be a deal breaker when searching for new and better solutions. Myself, being a management and strategy university student, I'm extremely interested in taking this opportunity to search for different possibilities. So, starting this quest, today I want to bring a different view on the challenges that are related with innovation. I'm pleased and honored to be joined with a professor of practice of innovation, innovation for impact, and also value creation in the Northeast University and WPI, where he teaches students, innovators, and also different companies. He is a pioneer in the development and the usage of best practices of innovation, helping and inspiring others to do it, including myself, in searching for the right answers related with innovations. He is also an advisor for governors and ministers around the world. I would like to welcome the former president and CEO of SRI International, a company that created one of the most heard voices of the world, the voices of Siri, among many, many other creations, Curt Carlson. Dear Curt, how are you today?
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Curt, we are here to understand how do we get better at innovation? How do enterprises and organizations can be capable of adopting an innovation posture around their strategy, around operations, well, around everything on a daily basis? In the end, it's all about delivering more value to customers, right? And the first thing that we need to clear that out of the way is what do you understand for innovation? And I'm sure you are asked these questions a lot. So, for you, what does innovation mean?
First off, if you're a professional, one of your responsibilities is to be a value creator. It's to solve problems that have meaning for others. It's not just to solve problems, it's to solve problems that have meaning for others, whether it's your customers, your end users, the company, your partners, your colleagues. Basically, everything you do is supposed to be for solving them in a way that delivers more value than just solving the problem. So that's first off, what we're talking about applies to everybody listening to this podcast. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what is innovation? So that's something I ask everybody when we first hold a workshop. And surprisingly, most people forget the really essential part of it determines whether it's an innovation or not. So I've asked this question probably to 10,000 middle managers and executives. And so far, only 2 have remembered this essential part. They all know it, they just don't remember to say it. It's not just creating something new or that's legal, that's patentable, that's an invention. But invention is different than innovation. Innovation is when you deliver something into the marketplace and it has a sustainable business model. So obviously that's not necessarily forever, but if people aren't using what you've invented, it's not an innovation. So there are 2 parts to it. You have to deliver something that creates new value for your end users and of course for your enterprise as well. But the other part that is often forgotten is the business model. And I can't tell you how many presentations I've heard where the presenter said, we'll get to the business model later. That is a big mistake.
Wow.
You don't want to get to the business model later. You want to have a pretty good idea of what's going to make your innovation sustainable before you go into the marketplace.
Okay, but should be innovation be considered as a mindset that companies must or should adopt?
Well, for sure, it's a mindset. So everything we do as a professional basically comes with a mental model, if you will. So the mental model of innovation is, I just said, which is it's the solving problems that have meaning for others. That's the mental model. And then to do that, there's a whole family of other mental models that allow you to do that efficiently and effectively. Now, if you don't have the right mental models, of course, that's also a problem because usually your mental model is something you believed for a long, long time, and it's hard to get rid of. So one of the issues we see with companies is, they can have a mental model for a business that's been very successful, but the world changes, the technology changes, the competition changes, and the mental models they had that were successful often become obsolete. And getting rid of them is a really, really hard thing to do. And that's why basically every company goes away. Eventually they just can't change fast enough. So it's all about the mental models you've got and the ones that are good and the ones that, of course, they're not good, you want to get rid of.
Yeah, that's great. I remember Daryl Rigby on the 2020 edition of Experience Agile saying that plans are useful, but planning is everything. And that's right. That's what you are talking about.
Yeah, just to build on though, it's having the right mental models. I'll give you an example. So
Sure.
when I hold a workshop, I actually start off by asking people for the definitions of innovation. I just gave that. Customer value, and what's a value proposition? Now, we consider the value proposition to be the most fundamental idea in value creation. And it has four parts. What's the need? Obviously, if you don't have a need, it doesn't make any sense. What's the approach for the offering? If you don't have an offering, it doesn't make sense, but also with the business model. So need and approach. The definition for customer value is benefits over costs. Again, most people forget, they don't really have thought about that. There's benefits over costs. That's the definition of value. And of course, there's a definition of value for both the end users and the enterprise and the staff and for others. And then the last principle is compared to the competition and the alternatives, just four questions. So this is a mental model. If you think this way, it's transformative. What's the need? Everything you do is a business professional. We can say more about that. What's the need? What's your approach for the offering and the business model? What are the benefits per cost? And why is that better than the competition and the alternatives? Just those four questions. How many teams, now I've done this with thousands of teams and leading companies around the world. How many teams have been able to answer those four questions when we first asked them succinctly, completely, and quantitatively? What do you think? What percentage of the teams have been able to answer those four questions?
Personally, I would say, I mean, I know the answer because we talked last week about that, but I'm going to give a few seconds for them to try to think about the number. But I would say that's pretty low, right?
It's basically zero.
Yeah.
Now, some people do a better job than others, but typically they haven't thought about it that way. So that's a mental model. And that one mental model, if everybody in your company shares that mental model, that everything you do starts out with the customer need, that is a transformative idea. And it's not complicated, it's just fundamental. In fact, you want it to be simple in the beginning because you want to start with the fundamentals. You don't want to start with a complicated framework like the business model canvas. That's a checklist. That's something like if you're building a building, you say, here's a checklist to make sure we did all this stuff right. That's a checklist. That's not a value creation framework. What you want to do is start out with the fundamentals. And I would tell you, having done hundreds and hundreds of these, answering those four questions is really, really hard. Really hard.
So, Curt, my question for you is, what is the biggest failure that you see over and over again? Since we are talking about that, what is the main point that should be the focus on innovative people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously, there are lots of ways you can fail. I mean, competition can come in. Your team can have issues, health issues or something, so the team can fall apart. Obviously, there can be an economic downturn that will make it hard for you to survive. So lots of things can go wrong. What is the biggest mistake we see? It's always basically the same thing. People see a problem. People can see problems. They can find problems. but they then jump to an approach. They see a problem and jump to an approach. And that approach is almost always wrong. It's almost always wrong. The issue that's hard to explain to people is that a problem is not a need statement. A problem means that there's something wrong, something going wrong that's not quite right, but it's not a need statement. So, we could use, for example, the original iPhone as an example of that. People could tell that when they had little keys on their smartphones, it was inconvenient to go find things. So that was the problem. There was an increasing number of applications and with a fixed number of little keys on this device, and you could never have enough keys to satisfy the needs of all those different applications. So that was a problem. So the situation was growing complexity. The problem was the keys were inconvenient. Okay, so what was the actual need? Well, basically, there needed to be an unlimited number of keys. So what did that mean? That means basically you needed a computer.
Yeah.
So that sounds easy. Of course, it was an enormous amount of work to show that you could actually create a small computer with lots of, an infinite number of little keys. And then Steve Jobs took it one step further. He created the multi-touch. That's where you can, expand images with your fingers. So that was kind of the wow factor. But people jumped from a problem to an approach. By the way, in this case, Nokia, to respond to the problem of their little keys, they created phones with more keys. So now we not only had inconvenient phones, we had bulky, inconvenient phones. So it works for a little bit, but it really wasn't the solution to the fundamental problem. So we see that's the biggest mistake. We see that. I would say we see that. Oh, every team we've ever been part of, that's the first thing that happens is they jump from a problem to an approach, and it's almost always wrong.
Okay, but looking inside an organization, not only on a team, what should be done about? Like, what are the awesome case studies that our listeners should be always get inspiration from?
Well, so first off, what can be done? Actually, it doesn't take, this is not quantum mechanics. There's some relatively straightforward things you can do that make a profound difference. When I walk into an organization, one of the first things I do is I look for these three principles. If these three principles are in place, I know they're going to be pretty successful. They don't have to do them exactly the way I would do them. That's not the point. But these things are so fundamental. If they don't do these three things, I know that they're only going to be episodically successful. So what are those three principles? The first principle we just said, they actually have some basic knowledge about how to identify actual needs and not just problems. Everybody can identify problems. That's not a problem. It's how do you convert problems into actual needs? So that's the first one, identifying problems that are worth working on. The second one is shared language. We've also talked about that. If you don't know what the definition of innovation, customer value, and a value proposition is, you're not going to be an efficient organization, because when I say it, after all, you speak Portugal, right? I'm not even sure that value proposition translates properly into Portuguese. So we'd have to make sure that when we're talking together, we're actually thinking the same things. Well,
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
In a company, you solve hard problems because you bring people with different backgrounds together. So, when we were doing things like Intuitive Surgical, there were mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, there were bio people, there were all kinds of people involved in that. And they all speak their own language. So one of the things is to give your people shared language so they can actually communicate and collaborate effectively. And the third thing is somehow you have to be able to put all the pieces together. Most review meetings, from my point of view, are a complete waste of time. They're actually painful because so little gets done. So we've come up with a different way to do review meetings based on just a few fundamental principles where people give short presentations. There'll be 5 or 6 teams who give short presentations, and then they get feedback. So if we were doing one together, for example, I might say, well, what did you like? And you'd say, okay. And then I'd say, well, how could we improve? Then we'd say, well, somebody else, why don't you be the eyes of the customer? Would you like that product? And then somebody else, we'd ask them, what about the company? If you were the CEO of the company, would you like this? So what we're doing is we're constantly focused on the fundamentals in reframing. We're looking at these problems from the different points of view of all of our stakeholders. So in summary, again, I look for, have they got a thoughtful way to identify needs? Do they have shared language? And do they hold meetings, let's say every month, that are 90 minutes long, focused only on the core fundamentals where people stand up and get feedback from their colleagues, all positive, no negatives. These are not Shark Tanks. Shark Tanks are a really dumb idea. There's so many dumb ideas out there. Shark Tanks are a really bad idea. It's not a Shark Tank. It's a place to go learn and improve and to share knowledge so you can solve the big important problems you're going after. So those three things, that's all you have to do, basically, and it'll be transformative. That's all we did at SRI when I went there. SRI had been failing for 20 years. It was bankrupt. Everybody hated each other because that's what happens when you're failing. The buildings were falling down. And with no money, we grew 3.5 times, and we were creating one multi-billion-dollar business after another, like Intuitive Surgical, high definition television. That's an Emmy over my shoulder right there. My team's won 2 Emmys, and obviously you mentioned Siri. That was one of our other, created 75 billion for Steve Jobs. We did okay too. But
More than okay, if I may.
So this is something that every company could teach their staff. When they hire somebody, since their job is value creation, why don't companies just spend a day teaching their staff these fundamental ideas? That's all it takes. That's what we did at SRI. That's all we did. And that one thing was transformative, just to give people the skills and the methodologies to basically do their job.
Okay. It's like putting everyone on the same boat and sailing to the same side.
Exactly right. If you're not going from Portugal to New York City together, you're probably not going to get there. And if you don't have a good boat, and the captain can't communicate to the teammates, it's not going to be a happy voyage. So absolutely.
Definitely.
Notice I never said we tell people what to do. The things we're talking about are basically how to more efficiently get the answers you need. We never tell people, in our workshops with companies, obviously we're not going in and telling people what to do. That's not it. It's just the question is, how can we be more efficient and effective and get the answers you need faster? Because speed matters. And if you can learn and improve faster than your competition, that's a huge advantage. Just consider this. We beat IBM with basically a bankrupt company with a fraction of the resources. We beat IBM with Siri by 7 years. That is crazy. That is crazy. Why? Because we actually did these things. We actually collaborated. We actually brought the right people together. And they don't in most big companies. I don't know if IBM still behaves that way, but when we were doing that, it was crazy that we could beat them with Siri by 7 years.
Yeah. That is the greatest case study that I think our listeners could have. But what, in your opinion, what should be like the first step? Our listeners just listen to this podcast and they are arriving tomorrow morning or the day after on the morning, and they start, okay, we need to have a different mindset, we need to have a different posture towards innovation. What should be done in the first place, in your opinion?
You don't need permission from your boss or your supervisor to start learning about value creation and innovation. I used to work for RCA. Big companies don't teach you these things. We became part of SRI, and with my partner, Norman Winarski, we just said to each other, we have to learn. We have to learn how to do this. They used to give us money in a big company, to do things. Now they expected us to actually earn an income. We didn't know how to do that. So we got together with no money, no official support. We just got together as a team for over pizza and Coke every other Monday night, and we started to learn. And we figured that out. And we discovered that what matters is just a few fundamental ideas. If you can master the few fundamental ideas, it makes a huge, huge difference. So I mentioned the most important. So you don't need permission from anybody to go look up on my website on LinkedIn, Curt Carlson, LinkedIn, right? That's all you have to do. And you will discover a series of short posts, and there's one on NABC value propositions. So you can learn it. If you decide that, and there's an article about what I call the 3 laws of value creation, which I mentioned, important needs, shared language, and recurring team value creation forums. There's an article on that. You can do those things. You don't need permission from anybody. It'll be awkward when you get started, of course, because it's a different mental mindset. But you can start doing this alone or with your buddy or with your team, and you do not need money and you do not need permission. But I guarantee you this, I guarantee anybody who takes this seriously, if you actually address those 4 questions seriously, quantitatively, people will notice. Because I guarantee you, there's probably no other presentation you're going to see in your company that will be as complete and compelling and concise if you do that. And we've had this happen over and over again. People have called me up and said, Curt, you can't believe what just happened. I just gave this presentation. Everybody said, where did that come from? Who is that person? And only because she, in this case, gave a complete, compelling value proposition that didn't go on for an hour. It was only 10 minutes long, but she answered all the fundamental questions and made a compelling case for what she was after.
Okay, and that's is all about. So great. Thank you so much, Curt, for your time. This was a special moment brought to you by the Experience Agile. And if you enjoyed and if you want to talk with Curt a little more about this and other important aspects of innovation, you can always do that from the 23rd to the 24th of September at the World Agility Forum, a conference, a part on the Experience Agile Week conferences in Lisbon, happening in Lisbon. We hope to see Curt over there to grab some drinks and to discuss some different topics about innovation and other themes as well. In the meantime, you can always check our videos on the YouTube channel, previous talks from Curt and from other important people with important things to say as well. Before we go, Curt, would you like to say anything to our listeners?
I think we said it all. I hope you just get started. I think just doing the few things we mentioned today would make a huge impact on your career. And the more you learn about this stuff, the more valuable you become, because very few people have these skills. And if you can create value for others, that's one of the best skills you can develop to have a long, successful, productive career. So I hope you'll join us. Join the Agile community, see us in Portugal, and keep on learning how to be a better value creator, because that is your job.
Definitely. Hope to see you there to check out with us your first thoughts about this different perspective on innovation as well. Till next time, thank you, Curt. Once again, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And till next time, take care. Don't forget to check our tickets available at experienceagileweek.org. There are many seats available. You can choose how to attend these 3 conferences. And if you want to, please join me and Curt on a drink to discuss more about innovation. As I said before, it will be a great experience. So take care. Till next time.